A tycoon intervenes in a restaurant dispute without realizing he's entering a deadly game. By offering shelter to a mysterious woman, he becomes the target of attacks, blackmail, and a web of corruption that threatens to destroy everything he's built. When his life turns into a relentless manhunt, he realizes the truth is far more complex than he imagined. Now every choice could be his last, and the only person who can save him may be the same one who put him in this game. If this story interests you, subscribe to the channel to receive all our thrilling stories. Continuing, the Bellagio restaurant shone like a jewel in the Las Vegas night. Its huge glass windows reflected the city lights, creating an atmosphere that blended luxury and intimacy. At one of the most discreet tables, Ethan Montgomery, 45, was conducting another of his routine business meetings. Known in the financial market as the calculator, his fame came from his unique ability to transform troubled companies into true profit machines without showing any hesitation or sentimentality in his decisions. So, gentlemen, as you can see from the numbers, the acquisition of Technova represents a unique opportunity. His deep voice echoed with authority as his fingers slid across the tablet screen, presenting graphs and projections to the other three executives at the table. With the right restructuring, we can triple the market value in 18 months. The waiter approached discreetly to serve more wine, while the other men absorbed the information with impressed expressions. Ethan was about to continue his presentation when a sudden movement at the next table caught his attention. A young woman who appeared to be no more than 30 years old stood up abruptly, accidentally knocking over her water glass. "Oh, you can't do this to me, Richard." Her voice trembled, but maintained a controlled tone, conscious of the refined environment. The man in front of her, wearing an impeccable suit, gripped her wrist with disguised force. "Sit down, Hazel," he ordered through clenched teeth. "Let's not make a scene." Ethan tried to return his attention to the meeting, but something in that woman's gaze disturbed him. It was a mixture of fear and resignation that he knew well. The same look his mother carried throughout his childhood, before finally finding the courage to restart her life. "Excuse me, gentlemen." Ethan stood up, surprising everyone at the table. He approached the couple with firm steps, adjusting the jacket of his Italian suit. "Good evening. Is everything all right here?" The man called Richard instantly released Hazel's wrist, forcing a cordial smile. "Perfectly fine, just a marital discussion." Hazel remained standing, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the strap of her purse. Ethan noticed the reddish marks on her wrist, and a long-dormant determination awakened in his chest. "Ma'am," he addressed Hazel, completely ignoring Richard. "I believe I know you from the Charitable Foundation Board. May I offer you a ride? I was just leaving." Hazel's eyes, a deep green that contrasted with her fair skin, met Ethan's with a mixture of surprise and relief. For a moment, time seemed to freeze as a silent communication was established between them. "Yes," she replied, her voice finding firmness. "I greatly appreciate your kindness." Richard stood up, his cordial expression starting to crack. "Hazel is my wife and we came together." "Ex-wife," Hazel corrected, taking a step towards Ethan. "The papers were signed 3 weeks ago, Richard. This conversation is over." Ethan made a discreet gesture, and instantly 2 security guards from the restaurant materialized near the table. Richard, realizing the situation, backed off with a forced smile. "This isn't over, Hazel," he muttered before retreating with artificial dignity. Ethan escorted Hazel to his table, where his associates observed the scene with poorly disguised curiosity. "Gentlemen, I apologize, but I'll need to reschedule our meeting. My assistant will contact you in the morning." Minutes later, Ethan and Hazel were in the private elevator leading to the restaurant's parking garage. The silence between them was heavy, laden with unasked questions and unspoken gratitude. "Where would you like me to take you?" asked Ethan, his voice softer now that they were alone. Hazel hugged her own waist, an unconscious gesture of protection. I don't know. I was staying at a hotel, but Richard found out where it was. I can't go back there." Ethan nodded, making a decision that would change the course of his next weeks, months, perhaps even years. "I have a secure apartment in Summerlin, used only for visiting foreign executives. I can offer it temporarily until you find a more permanent place." The elevator reached the garage, and the doors opened silently. Hazel hesitated for a moment, studying the face of the man in front of her. Years of experience with Richard had taught her to be wary of offers of help, especially coming from powerful men. But there was something different in Ethan's eyes, a shadow of understanding, perhaps even shared pain. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked. Ethan paused before answering, his hands instinctively closing. "Let's just say I've seen this movie before, and I didn't like the ending." The apartment occupied the entire top floor of an elegant building in the Summerlin area. When Ethan opened the door, Hazel was greeted by a sophisticated yet welcoming environment, with large windows offering a dazzling view of the illuminated city. "Make yourself at home," said Ethan, turning on the automated lights with a voice command. "There's a fully furnished guest room to the right of the hallway. The apartment has a state-of-the-art security system and 24-hour concierge. I'll let the management know that you're authorized to come and go freely." Hazel walked to the window, observing Las Vegas shimmering beneath her feet. Her reflection in the glass revealed a beautiful but visibly exhausted woman, not just from the difficult day, but from years of silent battles. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, turning to face him. "But you need to understand what you're getting into. Richard isn't just a disgruntled ex-husband. He has powerful connections, influence in places you can't even imagine." Ethan smiled slightly, pouring himself a glass of water in the American kitchen. "Miss Hazel? Just Hazel, please." "Hazel," he corrected. "I believe you don't know who I am," which isn't surprising since I make a point of maintaining a discreet profile in the media, but I can assure you that your concerns, though understandable, are unnecessary. He walked to the center table and, with a few taps on his smartphone, holographically projected a series of headlines and reports in the air. Hazel watched, impressed. The news about billion-dollar acquisitions, corporate restructurings, and a business empire that spanned 3 continents. "The Montgomery Group has a presence in 27 countries," he explained, turning off the projection. "Technology, renewable energy, financial market, and a security team that would make the CIA feel insecure." The last part was said with a slight tone of humor, but Hazel noticed the seriousness behind the words. "Still," she hesitated, "I can't accept so much help from a stranger. You don't know me, you don't know anything about me or my history." Ethan approached, maintaining a respectful distance. "I know enough. I know how to recognize when someone needs help, and I know how to identify a good person in difficulties. The rest you can tell me if and when you want." Hazel felt tears forming in her eyes but held them back. She had cried too much in recent years, and now was the time to be strong. "Are you sure you won't regret it?" "I'm sure I'll sleep better, knowing I did the right thing," he replied, heading for the door. "There's food in the fridge and the guest room closet has some basic clothes. We keep the apartment prepared for executives on emergency visits. Tomorrow we can provide whatever else you need." Before leaving, Ethan left a card on the table. "My private number is there. Anything, anytime, just call. The apartment has a virtual assistant. Just say Aurora and ask for what you need. Good night, Hazel." When the door closed, Hazel finally allowed a few tears to escape. She walked to the indicated room, surprised by the comfort and elegance of the environment. In the closet, she found sets of clothes still with tags in various sizes. She chose a pair of Egyptian cotton pajamas and after a long shower lay down on the soft bed. "Aurora," she called hesitantly. "Good evening, Miss Hazel," replied a soft, modulated voice. "How can I help you? Can you leave a dim light on?" "Certainly, I'll adjust the lighting to night mode. Would you like me to activate the sleep monitoring system as well? I can alert you to any suspicious movement in the hallway or common areas of the building." Hazel felt a wave of gratitude that Ethan had thought of details she didn't even know she needed. "Yes, please." Meanwhile, in the car on his way home, Ethan received a call on his private system. "Montgomery." "Sir?" His head of security's voice sounded tense. "We did a preliminary check on Richard Parker as requested. You need to see some things. Urgent." In the penthouse of the Bellagio Tower, located in the heart of the Las Vegas Strip, Ethan observed the city awakening through the windows of his private office. The sleepless night had left subtle marks on his always impeccable face, a consequence of the disturbing information that his head of security, Robert Sanders, had shared. "Are you sure you want to get involved in this?" asked Robert, placing a folder on the glass table. "Richard Parker isn't an ordinary businessman. His connections go far beyond the financial market." Ethan flipped through the documents with meticulous attention. Photographs, financial reports, and records of suspicious transactions painted a much darker picture than he had imagined. Richard Parker, apparently a successful financial consultant, had links to sophisticated market manipulation and money laundering schemes. "How does she fit into all this?" questioned Ethan, observing an old photo where Hazel appeared alongside Richard at a charity event. "That's the most interesting point." Robert pulled up a chair, sitting down. Hazel Winters was a brilliant financial analyst before marrying Richard, graduated in economics from Harvard, masters in finance from London, promising career at the Federal Reserve. Then, out of nowhere, she abandoned everything after the marriage. Ethan frowned, an uncomfortable feeling growing in his chest. Voluntary abandonment. Hard to say. But we found something curious. Robert slid more documents across the table. 3 months before the wedding, Hazel was investigating irregularities in some financial operations. The case was mysteriously archived, and soon after she resigned. Ethan's phone vibrated. A message from Aurora, the AI of the secure apartment. "Ms. Hazel awake. Normal vital signs. Requested breakfast." "I need to go." Ethan stood up, adjusting his suit. "Keep investigating, Robert. I want to know everything. Where she studied, friends, family, every detail of her life and Richard's." "Sir," Robert hesitated, "there's one more thing. The Montgomery Group companies started suffering speculative attacks on the stock market this morning. Apparently random, but the pattern is similar to what happened with other companies before they declared bankruptcy in recent years. They all had a connection with Richard Parker." Ethan paused at the door, his mind quickly processing the implications. Increase security, discreet but efficient, and Robert activate the Guardian protocol. In the Summerlin apartment, Hazel was finishing her breakfast when the doorbell rang. Aurora promptly announced, "Mr. Montgomery requesting entry." Hazel unconsciously adjusted the simple dress she had found in the closet. "You can open, Aurora." Ethan entered, carrying a designer shopping bag. "Good morning. I brought some things I thought you might need." "You've already done too much for me," Hazel protested, but Ethan left the bag on the sofa with a gentle smile. "It's nothing. How did you sleep?" "Better than in the last few weeks," she admitted, sitting down. "But we need to talk. There are things you need to know." Ethan settled into the opposite armchair, noticing how the morning light highlighted the delicate freckles on Hazel's face. "I'm listening." "Before I married Richard," she began, her hands nervously intertwining in her lap, "I worked at the Federal Reserve. I was a senior analyst, specialized in identifying suspicious operations. In 2019, I found strange patterns in some international transactions. Large companies were breaking without apparent explanation, while others emerged from nowhere with extraordinary profits." Ethan maintained his neutral expression, but his heart raced. It was exactly the pattern that Robert had identified this morning. "The more I investigated, the more complex it became. They weren't just isolated financial operations. It was an entire system, a network of influence and power that extended across various sectors. And then," she took a deep breath, "I met Richard at an event. He was charming, attentive, seemed really interested in my work." "When did you realize it was a trap?" Ethan asked softly. Hazel stared at him, surprised by his insight. "Today I found his name in one of the suspicious transactions. But it was too late. He had compromising information about my family, veiled threats about my younger sister's safety. I saw no choice but to marry him and abandon the investigation." Ethan leaned forward, his deep voice laden with concern. "And now he doesn't want to let you go because you know too much." "It's not just that." Hazel stood up, walking to the window. "In the last few months before I managed to separate, I found something much bigger, something that could bring down not just Richard, but the entire scheme. And he knows I have this information." "Where is this information?" Hazel turned, facing Ethan with a mixture of fear, and determination. In a safe place. But you need to understand something. By helping me, you've become a target. At this very moment, I'm sure they've already started acting against you and your companies. Ethan smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then we better act first. The afternoon was falling over Las Vegas when Ethan entered his office at the Montgomery Group. The last few hours had been intense. Emergency meetings with the board, conferences with lawyers, and a series of financial maneuvers to protect his companies from the intensifying speculative attacks. The stocks fell 12% just today, informed Melissa, his CFO, adjusting her thin-framed glasses. But we managed to contain the worst. The Guardian protocol is working. We diverted the most important assets to offshore companies before they could be hit. Ethan nodded, observing the graphs dancing on his holographic screen. Something in the pattern of the attacks intrigued him. Show me the transactions from the last 48 hours, starting with the technology sector. As the numbers flowed before his eyes, his mind returned to the conversation with Hazel that morning. There was something in her story that didn't fit completely, not because it seemed false, but because it seemed incomplete. His phone vibrated, a message from Aurora. Ms. Hazel requesting permission to access the apartment's encrypted file system. Ethan frowned. The file system was one of the most advanced features of the secure apartment, normally used to protect confidential documents of foreign executives. Aurora, authorize access, but keep a record of all activities. Mr. Montgomery, Melissa interrupted. His thoughts had been, there's something you need to see. She projected a new set of data. These are the attack patterns we're suffering, and these, she overlaid another graph, are the records that Hazel Winters was investigating at the Federal Reserve before she resigned. The patterns were identical. This can't be a coincidence, muttered Ethan, mentally connecting the dots. Melissa, I need you to do something for me, discreetly. In the Summerlin apartment, Hazel was working furiously on the file system. Her fingers flew over the holographic keyboard. Decades of experience in financial analysis guiding her movements. On the screen in front of her, complex patterns of financial transactions were revealed. Aurora, she called, can you create a simulation based on this data? I want to see how these transactions connect with the Montgomery Group companies. Simulation in progress, replied the AI. I should alert you that I detected similar patterns in recent operations involving Mr. Montgomery's companies. Hazel felt a tightness in her chest. It was exactly what she feared. The circle was closing. Faster than she had imagined. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened a private folder on her tablet. There she kept the only photo that remained of her family. Her still a child, with her parents and younger sister in front of their simple house in rural Virginia. Forgive me, Lucy, she whispered to her sister's image. I promise I'll fix everything. The sound of the door opening startled her. Ethan entered carrying a folder and a serious expression on his face. I found something interesting today, he said, sitting down beside her. Or rather, Melissa found it. You know what's curious about patterns? They tell stories to those who know how to read them. Hazel felt her blood run cold. Ethan, the attacks we're suffering, he continued, his voice controlled, are exactly the same as the ones you were investigating at the Federal Reserve. Not similar, Hazel. Identical. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering courage. When she reopened them, there was an iron determination in her gaze. 5 years ago, when I started that investigation, I had no idea what I was about to discover. It wasn't just a money laundering scheme or market manipulation. It was an entire system, a network that fed on legitimate companies, destroying some, strengthening others. And Richard was part of that. Richard is just a piece of the puzzle. There are much more powerful people involved, people who wouldn't hesitate to destroy lives to maintain their power. Ethan observed the tablet in her hands, the family photo still visible on the screen. Your sister, what happened to her? Hazel felt tears forming but held them back. Lucy was an investigative journalist. She was following a lead related to some of the companies involved in the scheme. Then, on an apparently normal day, she simply disappeared. 3 days later, I received a video of her, tied up, and a clear message. Either I married Richard, and abandoned the investigation, or she didn't need to complete the sentence. Ethan covered her hand with his, an instinctive gesture of comfort. That's why you couldn't simply run away, he concluded. You needed to gather enough evidence to expose the entire scheme. And protect Lucy, Hazel completed. She's alive, Ethan. They keep her as a guarantee of my cooperation, but now you have the evidence. Yes, she stood up, walking to the window. In the last few months, I managed to collect enough evidence to bring down the entire operation. It's all here encoded in the files I just transferred, but exposing this key would be like poking a hornet's nest with a stick. Ethan joined her by the window, his reflection overlapping hers in the glass. Then we won't do it alone. Hazel turned to face him, surprised by the determination in his voice. Why are you willing to risk everything for me? You barely know me. Maybe, he smiled slightly, but I know enough to know that some battles are worth fighting. At that moment, Ethan's phone rang. It was Robert. Sir, his voice sounded urgent. We just intercepted a communication. They know where she is, and they're coming. We have 15 minutes at most. Ethan hung up the phone and immediately began to act. Aurora, Emergency Protocol Alpha. Erase all access records from the last 24 hours and prepare the evacuation system. Protocol initiated, replied the AI, as discrete lights lit up in the apartment's baseboard, indicating the path to the emergency exit. Hazel was already in motion, her fingers dancing quickly over the holographic keyboard. I need 2 minutes to complete the file transfer. I can't lose this evidence. We don't have 2 minutes. Ethan gently held her arm. Aurora can continue the transfer remotely. We need to leave now. As if to emphasize the urgency of his words, the security system emitted a silent alert. 3 unidentified vehicles had just entered the building's perimeter. This way, Ethan guided her to an apparently ordinary panel in the kitchen wall. With a coded voice command, the panel slid open, revealing a passage. This is one of the advantages of being paranoid about security. The secret corridor was narrow, but well lit, leading to a modified service elevator that descended directly to a private garage 3 levels below the building's normal basement. Hazel noticed that her hands were trembling slightly and clenched them into fists. How did they find us so quickly? She asked, as the elevator descended silently. They didn't just arrive, Ethan smiled slightly. They've been here for days. Probably since I started helping you, they knew we'd eventually come here. Crouched behind a set of bushes, they observed the movement of the vigilantes. Their formations and equipment betrayed advanced military training. Is there another entrance? Whispered Hazel. Better than that. Ethan took a small device from his pocket that resembled a pen. There's an underground passage. My father had it built during the house renovation, inspired by the tunnels that bootleggers used during Prohibition. They skirted the property, keeping to the shadows, until they reached a denser area of the garden. Ethan pushed aside some climbing plants, revealing a camouflaged iron door at the base of a small hill. The biometric scanner still works, he murmured, pressing his thumb against a concealed panel. The door opened silently. The tunnel was surprisingly well preserved, with emergency lighting that turned on as they advanced. After a few minutes of walking, they reached a ladder leading to a trapdoor. We're directly under the office, explained Ethan. But before we go up, he turned to Hazel, his expression serious. You need to know the whole truth about your sister and my mother. Hazel felt her heart race. I'm ready. Lucy wasn't just investigating the case as a journalist, Ethan began, his low voice echoing in the tunnel. She was an undercover FBI agent. She was part of a special task force investigating financial crimes. My mother was her main informant. Hazel's hands trembled slightly. How did you discover this? I found some encrypted files in my father's private system a few weeks ago. I couldn't decipher them completely, but there were excerpts about an operation called Project Aurora, the same name as the AI my father developed. That's why he chose that name for the AI, murmured Hazel. It was a tribute to them. Ethan nodded. My mother and Lucy discovered that the energy market manipulation scheme was just part of something much bigger. There is a plan to control not just energy, but all the country's strategic resources. The Phoenix Group is just one of the visible faces of a much older and more powerful organization. The Dragon Constellation, completed Hazel. It wasn't just a code for transactions, it's the name of the organization. Exactly. When they realized the size of what they had discovered, they divided the evidence. One part stayed with my father, hidden in the safe. The other, with Beatrice Oliveira, Hazel completed. But why didn't they hand everything over to the police? Because they discovered there were infiltrators in the task force itself. Ethan checked his watch. The organization had people at all levels, of government and the private sector. They didn't know who to trust. A noise above them interrupted the conversation. Footsteps in the office. "There's one more thing," whispered Ethan, taking a flash drive from his pocket. "I managed to decrypt a message. It's from your sister, recorded a week before her disappearance." Hazel took the device with trembling hands. Ethan projected a small hologram on the tunnel wall, and Lucy's face filled the image. She was thinner than Hazel remembered, with deep dark circles under her eyes, but her eyes shone with the same determination as always. "Hazel, my sister," Lucy's voice sounded urgent but controlled. "If you're seeing this, it means the plan worked. You found Ethan, and together you've come this far. I know you must be angry with me for hiding so many things, but it was the only way to keep you safe. What we discovered is bigger than anything we could imagine. Marina was right from the start. It's not just about money or power. They're trying to rewrite the rules of the game. Control everything, from the energy that moves the country to the information that circulates. But they made a mistake. They became so confident in their own power that they left trails. And we found all of them." The image trembled slightly. "The safe contains only half of the truth. The other half... Well, you were always the smartest of us two. Remember our secret code when we were kids? The constellation I taught you to find. In the sky. The answer has always been there in the stars. Beatrice has the key, and Hazel, forgive me for everything, I love you." The recording ended, leaving a heavy silence in the tunnel. "The stars," murmured Hazel, her eyes shining with sudden understanding. "The pattern carved on the office wall. It's not just a map of the Dragon Constellation. It's a key. More. Footsteps above them, now closer. "Time to find out what's in that safe," said Ethan, reaching for the trapdoor. "Ready?" Hazel pocketed the flash drive and nodded, determination stamped on her face. "Ready?" The trapdoor opened silently, revealing the luxurious office of the Montgomery mansion. Moonlight entered through the tall windows, casting elongated shadows across the antique furniture. Ethan and Hazel emerged cautiously, their eyes adapting to the dimness. "There," whispered Hazel, pointing to the carved panel on the wall. The star map, much more elaborate than it appeared in old photos, occupied the entire expanse of the wall behind the mahogany desk. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, approaching. Ethan and Hazel exchanged quick glances before hiding behind a massive bookshelf. The office door opened, and 3 armed men entered, checking the environment. "Perimeter clear," one of them said into a radio. "No sign of intrusion." When the men left, Hazel was already at the panel, her fingers tracing the lines carved into the noble wood. "It's a mechanism," she murmured. "Each star in the constellation is a pressure point. The question is, what's the correct sequence?" Ethan joined her, studying the panel. "Lucy said the answer was in the stars, in your secret code." A soft smile appeared on Hazel's lips. "When we were children, we spent hours in the backyard observing the stars. Lucy had difficulty memorizing the constellations, so we created a story for the dragon." Her fingers rested on a specific star. It started with Thuban, the star that was once the North. As Hazel pressed the stars in the sequence of her childhood story, soft clicks echoed through the wood. When her hand touched the last star, Itamin, an internal mechanism, turned, and the panel slid to the side, revealing a modern digital safe. "Now the hard part," said Ethan, approaching the safe. "What would the password be?" Hazel studied the keypad for a moment. "Aurora," she called softly, "can you connect to the safe system?" "Connection established," replied the AI through Ethan's smartphone. "I detected an interesting pattern in the system. The password seems to be related to stellar coordinates." "The coordinates of Thuban," Hazel quickly typed a sequence of numbers. "From the time when it was the pole star." The safe emitted a soft beep and the door opened. Inside there was a single folder and an old tablet. "We need to be quick," murmured Ethan, taking the items. "They'll soon return for another round." Hazel connected the tablet to her own equipment, initiating a data transfer. Meanwhile, Ethan opened the folder, his eyes widening as he examined its contents. "This is..." He took a deep breath. "A complete list, names, dates, transactions. The entire structure of the Dragon constellation since its foundation 50 years ago." "Ethan," Hazel's voice trembled slightly, "the tablet, it's your mother's and Lucy's records, all the investigation, all the evidence. And there's more. Coordinates." "Coordinates?" "Of a place. Apparently it's where they hid the physical evidence. And," she paused, her hands shaking, "where Lucy is." Before Ethan could respond, lights came on in the garden, illuminating the office through the windows. Sirens began to sound in the distance. "Aurora," Ethan called quickly. "Situation." "Multiple vehicles approaching," replied the AI, "identified as FBI and Special Forces. I also detected encrypted communications, indicating the presence of Dragon constellation agents in the perimeter." Hazel finished the data transfer, storing her equipment. "How did they find us?" A calm smile appeared on Ethan's face. "They didn't find us. We brought them here." "What?" "When I activated the Guardian protocol, I wasn't just protecting our assets," he explained, taking a small device from his pocket. "I was activating an emergency protocol created by my father. All the evidence we just found has already been transmitted to secure servers in 5 different countries, and a complete dossier was automatically sent to news agencies and authorities around the world." Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, rapidly approaching. "But what about your company, your reputation?" "Some things are more important than money and power," Ethan took Hazel's hand. "My parents knew that. Your sister did too." The office door burst open violently. FBI agents invaded the room, weapons drawn, followed by Robert, Ethan's head of security. "Area secure," announced Robert. "The other targets are being detained in the perimeter." A man in a suit entered the office, showing his credentials. "I'm Special Agent Marcus Alvarez from the Special Task Force. Mr. Montgomery, Ms. Winters, your information was crucial. Operation Constellation is underway across the country. Richard Parker and the main leaders of the organization are being arrested as we speak." Hazel felt her legs weaken. Ethan supported her, holding her firmly. "And my sister?" she asked. Her voice choked. "A team is already on the way to the provided coordinates," replied the agent. "She's alive, Ms. Winters, and thanks to her work, Marina Montgomery's and yours, one of the largest corruption schemes in the country's history, is being dismantled." Hours later, on the mansion's terrace, Ethan and Hazel watched the sunrise. The last police vehicles were leaving the property, taking with them years of secrets and conspiracies. "What happens now?" asked Hazel, her body relaxing for the first time in days. Ethan looked at the horizon, where the first colors of morning painted the sky. "Now? Now we start to rebuild, not just the companies or reputations, but trust, in the system, in institutions, in people." Together, Hazel turned to him, her green eyes shining with a mixture of hope and affection. Ethan intertwined his fingers with hers, a soft smile on his lips. Together. After all, some constellations only make sense when you have someone to observe, them with you. In the sky, the last stars of the Dragon constellation disappeared with the arrival of dawn, giving way to a new day and a new beginning. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity for Ethan and Hazel. As the FBI and other law enforcement agencies worked to unravel the complex web of the Dragon constellation, the two found themselves at the center of a media storm. Despite Ethan's best efforts to maintain a low profile, the scale of the scandal made anonymity impossible. One crisp morning, as they sat in Ethan's penthouse overlooking the Las Vegas Strip, Hazel scrolled through news headlines on her tablet. "They're calling it the financial crime of the century," she murmured, a mix of awe and concern in her voice. Ethan sipped his coffee, his expression thoughtful. It's only the beginning. The Dragon Constellation's tentacles reached far deeper than even we realized. Just then, Ethan's secure phone buzzed. It was Robert. "Sir, we've got a situation. The team we sent to the coordinates, they've gone dark." Ethan felt his blood run cold. He looked at Hazel, who had sensed the tension and was watching him intently. "What do you mean, gone dark?" he asked, putting the call on speaker. "No communication for the past 6 hours. Last check-in indicated they had reached the location, an abandoned mining complex in Nevada. Then, nothing." Hazel's face paled. "Lucy," she whispered. Ethan made a quick decision. "Robert, prep the helicopter. We're going there ourselves." "Sir, I strongly advise against—" "This isn't up for debate," Ethan cut him off. "Be ready in 30 minutes. They prepared to leave. Hazel pulled Ethan aside. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "About the mining complex." Ethan studied her face, noting the mix of fear and determination in her eyes. "What is it?" "It's not just where they're keeping Lucy," Hazel explained. "According to the files we found, it's also the heart of their operation. A massive underground data center, processing and controlling financial transactions across the globe." Ethan's mind raced with the implications. "If we can access that data center, we could bring down their entire network," Hazel finished. "But Ethan, it's going to be heavily guarded. And there's something else. Something I've been afraid to admit." She took a deep breath before continuing. I think my father might be involved. There were references in the files to a master programmer, someone who designed the algorithms driving their financial manipulations. The coding style, the techniques used, they're eerily similar to what my father taught. Me? Ethan absorbed this new information, his expression softening as he saw the pain in Hazel's eyes. "You're not responsible for your father's actions, Hazel. Just like I'm not responsible for the choices made by some members of my family." He took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Whatever we find there, we'll face it together. Now, let's go get your sister." The helicopter ride to the mining complex was tense. As they approached the coordinates, the barren Nevada landscape gave way to a cluster of dilapidated buildings surrounded by rusted mining equipment. "No signs of our team," Robert reported from the pilot's seat. "But I'm picking up some unusual electromagnetic interference. Whatever's down there, it's big." They landed a safe distance away, the downdraft from the rotors kicking up clouds of dust. Armed with state-of-the-art equipment and bulletproof vests, Ethan, Hazel, and a small team of Montgomery Group security personnel approached the main building. The entrance was hidden behind a rusted iron door, its lock a sophisticated biometric system, incongruous with the decrepit surroundings. Hazel pulled out a small device from her pack. "A little gift from your R&D department," she explained to Ethan's raised eyebrow. "It should bypass the security system." After a tense minute, the lock disengaged with a soft click. The door swung open, revealing a sterile, brightly lit corridor that contrasted sharply with the exterior. As they moved deeper into the complex, the hum of powerful computers grew louder. They encountered surprisingly little resistance, a fact that put Ethan on edge. "It's too easy," he muttered. They rounded a corner and found themselves in a vast underground chamber. Rows upon rows of servers stretched as far as the eye could see, blinking lights and humming machinery, creating an almost hypnotic atmosphere. "My God," Hazel breathed. "This is it, the nerve center of the entire operation." But Ethan's attention was drawn to a figure standing at a control panel at the far end of the room. As they approached, the figure turned. Hazel gasped. "Dad?" Dr. James Winters, looking older and more haggard than Hazel remembered, regarded them with a mixture of resignation and defiance. "I wondered when you'd finally find this place," he said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Where's Lucy?" Hazel demanded, her voice shaking. James gestured to a door to his right. "She's safe for now." He turned his gaze to Ethan. "Mr. Montgomery, your parents would be proud. You've unraveled in weeks what took them years to discover." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Where are the members of my security team?" "Also safe," James replied. "I have no desire for unnecessary bloodshed. But I'm afraid I can't let you leave with what you found." Hazel took a step forward. "Dad, why? How could you be part of this?" James's expression softened slightly. "Oh, Hazel, you always saw the world in black and white. But there are shades of gray you can't imagine. What we've built here, it's not just about money or power, it's about control, stability, a way to guide the course of history itself." "By manipulating markets, destroying lives," Ethan interjected. "By ensuring that the right decisions are made," James countered. "By subtly nudging the levers of power to maintain balance. Yes, there are casualties, but the alternative is chaos." As he spoke, Ethan noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Robert and the security team were quietly positioning themselves around the room. "And Lucy?" Hazel asked, her voice breaking. "Was she just another casualty?" For the first time, James looked genuinely pained. That was never part of the plan. Richard acted on his own when he took her. I've been trying to find a way to free her without compromising everything we've built. Ethan saw his opening. "Dr. Winters, it's over. Even if you stop us here, the evidence has already been released. The FBI, Interpol, they're all closing in, but you can still do the right thing. Help us shut this down and I'll do everything in my power to ensure you and Lucy are protected." James hesitated, conflict clear on his face. But before he could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the complex. "Multiple breaches detected," a computerized voice announced. "Emergency protocols initiated." James's eyes widened in panic. No, he muttered, turning back to the control panel. His fingers flew over the keys. "They're trying to wipe the servers remotely. If they succeed, all evidence will be lost, and the financial systems connected to this hub will crash. We're talking global economic collapse." Ethan made a split-second decision. "How do we stop it?" James looked at him in surprise, then nodded. "We need to initiate a controlled shutdown, but it requires simultaneous authorization from 2 senior members of the organization. I can't do it alone." "I can help," a new voice called out. They turned to see Lucy emerging from the side room, supported by 2 of Ethan's security team members. Despite looking weak and disheveled, her eyes burned with determination. "Lucy!" Hazel cried, rushing to embrace her sister. "There's no time," Lucy said, gently disentangling herself. "Dad, you know I had high enough clearance. Let's end this." James nodded, tears in his eyes. "Together then." Father and daughter positioned themselves at separate terminals. Under James's guidance, they initiated a complex series of commands. For several tense minutes, the outcome hung in the balance, as the system fought against their efforts to shut it down. Finally, the alarms ceased. The hum of the servers began to die down, and the lights dimmed to emergency levels. "It's done," James said, his voice heavy with finality. "The Dragon constellation is no more." As if on cue, the sound of helicopters and vehicles could be heard from above. "That'll be the FBI," Ethan said. He turned to James and Lucy. "Are you ready?" James nodded, looking older than ever. "I suppose it's time to face the music." As they made their way back to the surface, Hazel fell into step beside Ethan. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Ethan took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Now, we rebuild. It won't be easy. The repercussions of this will be felt for years, but together I think we have a chance to create something better, something transparent and fair." Hazel smiled, a mix of exhaustion and hope on her face. "Together?" she repeated. As they emerged into the harsh Nevada sunlight, surrounded by FBI agents and the whirl of helicopter blades, Ethan and Hazel knew that this was not an ending, but a beginning. The Dragon constellation had fallen, but from its ashes, a new day was dawning, one of accountability, justice, and hope. In the months that followed, Ethan and Hazel worked tirelessly to help authorities unravel the full extent of the Dragon constellation's operations. The Montgomery Group, under Ethan's leadership, became a model for corporate transparency and ethical business practices. James Winters and many other high-ranking members of the organization faced trial. While the legal battles were complex and often contentious, the evidence was overwhelming. In exchange for his cooperation, James received a reduced sentence, and both he and Lucy entered witness protection programs. Hazel, with her unique insight into both the financial world and the workings of the Dragon constellation, became a key advisor to a newly formed international task force dedicated to preventing similar schemes in the future. Her experiences had given her a nuanced understanding of the shades of grey her father had spoken of, but also a fierce determination to fight for what was right. One evening, about a year after the events at the mining complex, Ethan and Hazel stood on the balcony of their new home in the hills overlooking Las Vegas. The city glittered below them, a reminder of both the temptations of wealth and the possibilities for positive change. "I got a message from Lucy today," Hazel said, leaning into Ethan's embrace. "She's doing well. Started a new life, even talking about writing a book someday." Ethan smiled. "I'm glad. She deserves a chance at peace after everything she's been through." Hazel nodded, then turned to face him. "What about you? Any regrets about how things turned out?" The Montgomery Group took a big hit in the aftermath. Ethan considered the question seriously. "There are days when it's tough," he admitted. "Rebuilding trust, both in the business world and with the public, is a slow process. But then I remember what we uncovered, what we prevented. No, I don't regret it. We did the right thing." Hazel reached up, tracing the lines that had appeared at the corners of his eyes over the past year. Lines of stress, yes, but also of laughter and hope. "We did," she agreed, "and we'll keep doing it one day at a time." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms and watching the sun set over the desert, they both felt a sense of peace that had eluded them for so long. The path ahead was not easy, but they would walk it together, guided by the stars that had brought them to this point. In the sky above, the stars of the Dragon constellation twinkled, no longer a symbol of secret power and manipulation, but a reminder of the mysteries yet to be uncovered and the battles yet to be fought. For Ethan and Hazel, it was a call to remain vigilant, to continue seeking truth and justice in a world that often seemed shrouded in shades of grey. As night fell and the stars grew brighter, they knew that their story, like the constellation above, would continue to evolve, bringing light to the darkness and hope to those who dared to look up and dream of a better world.